And now, to introduce the next project, this project is actually led by one of the godfathers of DLT, and it goes way back to 1982. I think some of you may know him, Mr. David Chaum. However, he unfortunately can't make it today. So we have his president, Mr. Jim DOLBEAR of Praxis and Elixxir, and also Jay CASSANO, the executive editor of Cointelegraph, for our next fireside chat on privacy and the decentralized web. So please give them a round of applause and enjoy your panel.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this afternoon fireside chat. I'm Jay CASSANO, editor of Cointelegraph, and I'm here with Jim DOLBEAR, president of Elixxir Corp., which is the creator of David Chaum's Elixxir blockchain platform. He also established the Voting Systems Institute with David Chaum at University of Southern California's Information Sciences Institute. He earlier ran a 20-person executive search and consulting firm, the Larkin Group, which was focused on the emerging new media and internet industries, founded the Digital Coast Roundtable with then-Mayor Richard Riordan, and also ran Lawnmower, a trade show and publishing company that held events in Los Angeles, New York, and San Francisco. Great to have you here.
Yeah, thank you very much. Great to be here.
I think everyone's sad to hear that David couldn't make it. Is he doing well, resting up?
Yeah, no. We were at Web Summit in Lisbon, and he got a head cold and it went to his chest. So he ended up visiting the hospital for some antibiotics, along with a bunch of other people who were there from Web Summit, unfortunately.
But
he's fine.
He's doing fine. Good to hear. I just wanted to jump into this, I guess, and talk about Elixxir. Some of the big news recently that would be relevant to you is Google's announcement of supposed quantum computing supremacy. Praxis previously got a lot of attention for working on a quantum-resistant cryptocurrency.
Yes.
But there's also been a lot of pushback about, is quantum really a threat to blockchain technology, or will it ever be? Is it just not a threat yet? What's your thought on that? And
well, our view is that we wanted to create a digital currency that was, future-proofed, so it would last. And so, specifically, when the threat would be, or when quantum computing would become real or relevant, wasn't important to us. We just felt that it's coming in the time frame. And I think, David in particular has had some personal experience with this. And what happens, and for people who know a little bit the history of World War II, is if you've cracked people's codes, you don't tell them. Because this is what happened between the United States and Germany. The United States knew a bunch of the codes and secret communication for Germany, and they didn't reveal that because the minute they revealed it, then Germany would change everything. So what happens is, and it has happened historically with the United States with the NSA, is that they know the back doors, they have the crypto, but they don't tell anybody because they want access. So you never know when this stuff is really going to happen. And the fact that, so basically, we made the determination under David's leadership that, we need to take this stuff seriously, that it's coming. And so it was kind of a surprise when Google made that announcement. We had made a commitment to have a quantum secure blockchain and currency within Praxis, way before that. And I think, if Google, which is a commercial entity, and if there are a lot of smart people at Google, but if you know Google X and Google Labs, if they have quantum computing, then China does, the United States. It's not like they're way ahead of the national labs and the stuff that's happening on a clandestine basis. So it's highly likely that the big nation states have it as well, or will soon. The thing that goes along that, the corollary is that, and you can see it, with what's happened in American elections, is that sort of the good news is that we haven't had a really, we have people dying and we have drones and awful things happening, but we haven't had a huge land war in the tradition of the Great Wars in decades, which is historically, amazing. But what we are seeing is, kind of new age forms of warfare. So we have the Russians attacking the United States election system and trying to manipulate Brexit and that kind of thing. And currencies, digital currencies and payment systems are an exposure. And so if you're a nation state, if your payment system or your currency is vulnerable, it can be real trouble. And just by as a quick anecdote, I was in Istanbul maybe 2 weeks ago, and David and I were meeting with this. It was a group of sort of leaders, the head of the telephone company, kind of establishment leaders in Turkey, trying to understand like what would the blockchain make, what would be the right use of blockchain to help Turkey. And I was having dinner, and I made this very same point, and I said, you have to be aware of this, that other countries can really come at you and damage you by damaging your currency. And then I paused and I said, like we did that to you a year ago. And the guy, he was blinking, he goes, you're right. Because the United States did screw with the Turkish lira. I don't know if people know it, but pretty seriously about a year ago. And he was like, yeah, you're right.
So they were convinced by
that.
that.
They're like, we know, we've experienced that personally. So, so you really, these days, you have to worry about this kind of like, cyber warfare, really. Yeah. And if you were just to make, some data behind this, if you look at DARPA, which is, the Advanced Research Project Agency for the United States, they blow a lot of money on, projects. But if you look sort of like, if you were to look over the last 30 years and just do a little pie chart, I wish I had it, you'd see like the amount of money and the amount of headcount on cyber warfare is through the roof. It's like 3/4 of what DARPA, is looking at now, because that's where the action is. So quantum, have to be quantum secure. That's it.
And yeah, it's going to happen at some point, and it's just better to be prepared.
That's our view, and it seems to be somewhat supported. Cool. The other thing I would throw in there, just from a technical standpoint,
sure,
because I think it took me a while to understand this, and so, like David is a famous cryptographer, but he's sort of a Luddite. He doesn't really. It's kind of counterintuitive. He doesn't trust computers, and he doesn't trust fancy cryptography either, because it's a nightmare working with him, because he won't use online banking or any kind of electronic system, because he's like, you can't trust that stuff. You don't know what they're doing. And he's right. Like, that's his whole job, is to understand that. When you have when I say fancy cryptography, I mean cryptography that has structure in it. Mm-hmm. So what that means is that you just think of it as a secret code, right? You represent to the world that it's actually random, but it's not. There's a secret pattern in there that only you know. And you think, and it makes it easier for you to decode. So this is how a lot of the systems create efficiency, is they have this crypto, which looks random, but it's not. And then they claim that it's unbreakable at its randomness level, but then they can unpack it efficiently using the structure that's in there.
And
right?
As soon as you embed that kind of structure.
Once that structure is in there, if anyone finds the structure, then they can decode it just as like you. So the problem is, when you put structure in crypto and you throw in some like really fancy computing, it's over. So what we did and in Praxis, and Praxis is our consensus and digital currency solution. We have a separate team that works in the Cayman Islands. And Elixxir, which is the sister project, is the efficient mixed network that provides the privacy platform. And that's our team in Los Angeles, outside Los Angeles. But what Praxis's claim to fame is we just use hashes, just large random numbers. That's it. And, so we just make those numbers really big. And we have some very fancy ways to build in efficiency that took us a lot of time to come up with. But fundamentally, the crypto is very straightforward. It's big random numbers, and that's why it's strong.
Yeah. So speaking of Elixxir and privacy, I know privacy is an issue that's close to David's heart. I assume close to yours as well. And I think it's probably a reason that a lot of people got into different parts of this space. As the blockchain space has been maturing, part of that means complying, and in particular cryptocurrency space, part of that means complying with regulators. And there's a lot of debate right now around anti-money laundering regulations. How do you balance the need for complying with regulators while maintaining privacy?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question, obviously. Let me put it in the context of sort of what our mission is, or the original vision. And this dates back to sort of the late 70s and early 80s, and I'll put it in David's voice, and this is where David really sort of established himself as a leader, but I'm not completely clear why this is the case, but there were a bunch of people at Berkeley in the late 70s, and David's office mate was Eric Schmidt, who's the chair of Google, and Bill Joy sat across the hall. Bill Joy is the guy who invented Java and the first open source software, which was called the Berkeley Software Distribution. And he was partner at Kleiner for many years.
It's a heck of a hallway.
Yeah, it was David said they just had a lot of funding, and they had some real strong faculty members, so they pulled a lot of people in. And but what happened, they were, Berkeley at that time was, on the left side of things, and so they were generally speaking, sort of liberal-minded people, and I think they spent a fair amount of time just trying to imagine what's going to happen when the digital world really takes off. Now, in those days, there were, communication networks within universities, and there were some bulletin boards, and there had been some fundamental research done in the 60s. Like the notion of, if you look back, you'll see that the notion of viral networks and stuff was thought of in the 60s, but no one really took it seriously as actually being implemented in society at large. And they were the first group of people who said, like, what is really going to happen when this is like implemented on a mass market for all of us, for normal people? And what came out of it was, David's group are the people who are worrying about what happens to all the data. Like, what happens when all the governments and corporations have all the data? And then Bill Joy's group was like, what happens when the governments and the corporations have all the software? And so that's where the open source guys were the software people, and David was the privacy and anonymity people. And so, like, David's thesis was on voting. Mm-hmm. And he invented something called a double-blind signature. And the things that underpin secure voting are exactly the same as what underpins electronic cash. Because technically the problem is very similar. You need to identify who the other person is without knowing who they are. So like with a check, you need to, if you're doing a financial transaction with another person, they need to know who you are and what your bank is so they can understand that the check is good. And you need to know who they are to give it to them. And so there's no privacy and anonymity. What David did in creating electronic cash was to create a way to authenticate who the person was without revealing their identity. And that's what sort of turned an electronic check into cash. And that's what eCash is. And the invention is called a double-blind signature, which is like, I sign and you know that I'm real, and you sign, but neither of us knows each other's identity.
And it's just verified by the software,
yes,
all the relevant
yes,
pieces of data. Do you think that'll be enough to satisfy regulators?
So back to so what happened in terms of the way this all unfolded originally was that it largely had to do, the notion of privacy had to do with political expression. It was more about, like, who are you talking to? What are you talking about? What are you reading? Where are you? Who are you, when were you talking with people? And what this is now called, this kind of information about people, it's called metadata. That's the new word. Back in the day, the CIA and the NSA used to call it traffic information, sort of information on the network. And so what we're trying to do, and what our goal is to allow people to control that information about themselves. And so for us, we're much more concerned about the high volume information. So like, if you go to the same cafe, say, somewhere in Syria, and you pay for coffee every day and you meet with some dissidents, it's the payment information. They're all paying for the same coffee in the same place that allows people to know that they're meeting. For us, that's a privacy concern. People moving large amounts of money is not really our bailiwick. So traditionally, for the financial regulations like FinCEN, and anyone who's moved more than $10,000 recently knows this, the payment systems and small kind of what it takes to live your life and buy food and stuff has pretty good privacy, and that's why cash itself exists. But then if you start moving larger amounts, there's a bank record, and we're pretty much okay with that. And the other thing I would say, this is an interesting thing, I didn't really understand this. I was in Germany, in Munich, and I was meeting with a company that was founded in 1852, one of the largest security printers, and the guy who runs their currency operation is head of the International Currency Association, wow, which exists and has existed for many years. And they are the cash people, and it's made up of central bankers and security printers, and these are the sort of, in the blockchain ethos, these are the people who are trying to control, and they love cash, and they firmly believe in cash, and they believe that a certain level of economic activity should be able to be conducted without government surveillance. So it's like there's much more agreement about that than you would guess.
Do you have a view on moving to a cashless society, or if we should still?
Well, so it's a good question. The lead on that really is Sweden.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've heard about this, but I'll share with what they're up to, or what. There are various rates of adoption of electronic payment systems and of electronic cash. And Sweden, for reasons I'm not completely clear, they're really high. They're at 90%. So they almost have no cash. And what's happening, the government is concerned that without cash, the people who are disenfranchised from the electronic system will not be able to live as part of society. So, and also they're enormously concerned about basically fail-safing the electronic system, because similarly what I started with when we were first talking, if you have a natural calamity or you get attacked and no one can pay or do anything without the electronic systems go down, you can have societal breakdown like quickly. No one can buy water, buy food. So Sweden is trying very hard to protect cash. And everyone in the rest of the world is like, this is sort of the beta test. That, it proves that you need cash.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, what kind of progress have you guys made on developing the Elixxir currency or Praxis currency that was talked about previously?
Well, it goes with a little bit with what I was saying about sort of what our mission is. We started with Elixxir, with the mix, and David invented what's called a mixed network, and basically it's a little bit like sort of shuffling cards, or like there's Russian dolls where there's a doll within a doll within a doll. What happens is you have multiple servers kind of in a chain, and the first one puts on like 9 layers of cryptography, and the second one takes one off and puts one on, and the third, and so basically what ends up happening is that everything is like multiply encrypted, but none of the servers know all the encryption. So it's sort of like when if you're ever in Las Vegas, sometimes they'll like at the high table, they make different people shuffle different cards because they want to believe it's really, and then the idea there is if it's fixed, that it won't work because they're all different people shuffling. So that was the idea of a mix, and that's behind Tor, if anyone's that's based on David's work. The problem was there's so much encryption and decryption, which is lots of big numbers and computing, is really slow. So when he first invented it, you really couldn't implement it in any, normal sense. And then some years later, it was implemented as Tor, but Tor is slow. So, maybe the biggest innovation about Elixxir, which is a next generation mixed network, which we call CMix, is that David figured out how to create the encryption and decryption structures in something we call pre-computation, which is before they're needed. So the way the system works is we have teams of computers, of nodes in blockchain speak, and the encryption and decryption framework is set up, and they're just there waiting. So when you need it, you just load the data, and boom, it goes right through. And it's like 3 orders of magnitude, so meaning we're about 1,000 times faster than Tor.
And so what's the status of the currency?
So what happened is that that was implemented by an academic consortium starting in 2014, 2015, in software, both the back end and also a client. And we founded and started working on Elixxir as a commercial entity about 2.5 years ago. And we're sort of in version 3 of that implementation. So the mixed software exists and it's being implemented. We call it a public alpha. It's running right now on nodes on 4 different continents that are run by third party, meaning they're not our nodes. And we just last week, we released a messenger we call XX Messenger, which you could, if you're interested in using it, which I hope you would, you can go to our community site, which is xxcollective.io, and we have an app that you download and you get on the list to get that, that it'll be distributed to you. But so that messenger is just now being used, and it allows you to communicate and all the information about your activities is hidden. We set up the coin structures to make payments through that messenger, starting about 2 years ago. But then we stopped working on the consensus solution, the sort of traditional blockchain stuff. And that's when we founded, Praxis, and we moved a team to the Cayman Islands, and they've been working on a consensus solution for the mix and also for themselves to support and secure the currency that is called XX Coin, which we're just announcing this week. And the other thing I did want to mention, the reason we're in the Cayman Islands is because we have 2 really good guys who just happen to be Portuguese. I don't know. It's in the water in Portugal, but they're really valuable to us, and that we couldn't get them a longer stay in the United States. We had visa problems. So it turned out that the easiest place that was the closest to the United States where we could get clean visas was the Cayman Islands. So that was the fastest way for us to get a group on the ground somewhere near us.
Yeah. So in journalism speak, we might say that you buried the lead there a little bit. I want to be clear for folks that there is now an XX coin that's out there that is being announced, and people can start to use.
Yeah. No, thank you for saying that. Yeah. So because it goes also to the question, we started with privacy because that's kind of like what we care about on some level, and the blockchain people thought we were kind of crazy. Like, where's the consensus? Where's the coin? And we were like, well, we have to do the privacy first. And everyone's like, hey. So, we're really proud of it, and it's sort of a big deal for us. But it's also puts us squarely back in kind of the blockchain ethos space, that we actually have a digital currency that's going to be available. And it is quantum secure. So we would represent that, it should be considered on its own as, a store of value, if you will. But it also is integrated with Elixxir, with the messaging and privacy platform, so it can be used for private payments. And it's very fast, so it can be used on smartphones. We have the big breakthrough with Praxis is the time to finality, and the way we reach consensus is very rapid. So we can make payments on smartphones in seconds and close the payment. So that also puts you, not only in conversation with other crypto projects, blockchain projects like Telegram and Ton that are messengers with payment systems. It also puts you in a category with WeChat, with Facebook trying to build Libra, messengers that also have payment systems. Yeah, no. I mean, the way we would tell the story is that what we're trying to do is provide a platform where the things you do the most which reveal the most about you, that we allow you to decide when people can see all that. So we look at it as a privacy thing, as I've said, but it turns out the things you do the most are messaging, payments, small payments, and some things like, that have to do with transportation, where you are, and also data transfer. So those are the things we're focused on. And yeah, it's a lot like WeChat. I think WeChat sort of did it the other way around, really as a matter of convenience. Like they just added the things that people do the most so that it was easy for people. But yeah, we look at WeChat really as a model, except the only problem with WeChat is the Chinese government has everything on WeChat. So if you happen to be living in China and you use WeChat, they know everything about you. So you can think of us as like WeChat, as good as WeChat from a consumer, convenience, but with none of the kind of government violations and surveillance, really. So
Sounds promising to me.
that's the idea. Yeah, we think that's sort of the end game.
Yeah.
And I think that, to answer the question about Libra and Facebook,
Sure.
I mean, Facebook, what happened is, I think I'm right in saying this. I mean, you can see it's in the public domain. The news feed, what people think of it as their Facebook page, that's been declining. So they have a revenue problem on that side of the business. They bought WhatsApp really kind of as a strategic thing, and Instagram, and then that stuff started growing because people are using sort of message-based social media more than the traditional feed. And they saw that themselves as a company. So they see WhatsApp's, growing, and then they studied WeChat. They're like, what we really need to do is get some payments in there, and then we can recreate the advertising model. We'll know what everyone's doing. And that kind of blew up on them, starting in about March, because people were like, wait a second, it's going to be even worse. Now they're going to know the payments, they're going to know. And I think they didn't see that coming at all. They were really insensitive to it. Yeah. And I was actually shocked when the media first covered. I don't know, you professionally, it's rare to have members of the media in both large, established publications like the New York Times and Wall Street Journal and the smaller niche. Everyone attacked Facebook. Like, it was amazing. Just came out of the woodwork.
Yeah, it's pretty rare that people gang up like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of pent-up frustration.
Yeah, I think people are primed now to be a little more skeptical of Facebook as well.
Yeah.
It's been really great to talk to you. Unfortunately, our time is up for this panel.
Yeah, thanks. It's great. Yeah.
But really fantastic to have you on this panel. I hope this was interesting for everyone here. I encourage you to check out Elixxir and the new XX coin.
Thank you very much, Jay.
Thank you so much, Jim and Jay.